I never thought I'd have a frightening story to be told. About 4 months ago, I was single and not looking for a man, but fate had a different path in mind. I was driving with my mother when she asked me to pull over because there were beautiful flowers in the median. It was right next to a roundabout, so there wasn't anywhere to pull over, so I let her out and drove to the next driveway, which was a closed business. There was a man walking on the sidewalk. He wasn't relevant until I made my turn around and came back and my mom was talking to him. This man was actually a brother of someone that my mom dated about 20 years ago, but we're still friends. Now, just so you're aware, I'm very sensitive to people's energies and auras. Before this man even got in our van, I was immediately connected and could almost say I felt he needed love, needed me. I'm not going to go into detail about our relationship, but I will say it was not healthy. He told me all sorts of messed up things. Told me that he's hurt people. Told me he was someone who took care of business, as in disposing of blood money or even bodies. He had a reputation of being a god in certain towns. I feel that these things should have scared me, but really didn't. I almost felt safer, and I'm sorry if that sounds twisted, but it's true. Things between us really started going downhill. I tried a drug that really messed me up. It got a hold of me and my psyche. He had a history of mental health issues. He also had a history of obvious drug use, and he had beat most of his girlfriends, and his brother, my mom's ex, had tried to warn me about all of this, but you know how it is when you're so deeply in love with somebody and someone else tries to warn you or tell you something about this person. You just don't listen. In a 4-month span, he pushed me down probably 10 times, and I noticed during intimacy he liked to slap me in the face. Red flags that I should have paid attention to. I honestly figured I'd be pushed a few times, but I never thought that he would actually try to end my life. Now, the last few days of our relationship, I was acting crazy. I broke things, I slammed doors. I was not okay. Well, I was triggering his poor mental health, I suppose. The last night we were together, my dog killed my rat, and it set off something horrible in my brain, and I cried and cried as I crawled back in bed with my boyfriend. Apparently, I woke him up and made him mad to the far extreme. He jumped out of bed, started packing his stuff, which was something that he had been doing for days, threatening to pack his stuff and leave because he can't handle how I was acting. What really hurt was that he had proposed just a few days prior. But of course, all of this made me go even crazier, but I got a hold of myself because I knew if I reacted, he'd flip out even more, so I just laid down and cried myself to sleep. I do remember him laying down with me, but at a distance. All I really remember was that waking up at 5 or 6 in the morning to his mouth against my cheek. He was actually biting me and yelling at me, saying I'm lucky he didn't carve my face while I was sleeping. I literally could not believe the words that were coming out of his mouth or the fact that he was biting my cheek. He was laying directly on me. And just so you know, about 3 weeks before this, I had fallen off a horse and really bruised my ribs, so I couldn't breathe at all, not to mention that I also have asthma. I was screaming at him to get off of me. I couldn't breathe, and just repeating myself over and over I barely remember, but I think I punched him in the face because he wouldn't move and he was screaming at me. Well, that was a big mistake. He grabbed my throat with his hands and squeezed so hard, I could feel the oxygen being pulled from my brain. I've never felt anything so painful and terrifying in my life. I saw the look in his eyes and it was terrifying. He actually wanted me dead. It was an evil, empty look. Time was at a standstill. I don't know how long he was strangling me, but it felt like hours. I thought this was it. I thought the love of my life would be the death of me. Next thing I know, my mom is in my doorway screaming for him to get off of me. He let go and left. My mom not hitting snooze on her alarm clock saved my life that day, and I will never be so grateful. At that point in my life, I was actually happy to be alive. The drugs I was doing changed something in me and made me just not care about anything but this murderous man and the drug that was eating away at everything I was. I lost everything else in these 4 months. At one point, I had lost my home. My mother kicked me out. This man was also homeless, so it was a sad, scary situation for me. I'm glad I got out of all of it, but why did it have to end in such a nightmarish way? Fate is unpredictable, so I stay on my toes now. I hope I never see a look in someone's eyes the way I did that morning. Be cautious about the decisions you make in life. My family and I had just moved into a new house. This was right after the housing market went way up in the 2000s, so the house where we were moving into was a dump because that's all we could afford in our school district. It had previously been a crack house. The windows were busted by police, fence taken down by SWAT, needles in the garbage disposal. It was a dump. So my mom and stepdad were fixing it up before we finally moved in. We had a month to get out of the house that we were renting to get into our new house. My sister's dad would go over and paint. We had to because everything was covered with graffiti. He got home one night and said, "When I got to the house today, I saw a little kid." This was after they had already replaced the windows so nobody could break in. He said he came into the house and he saw a kid go from one bedroom into the master. So we went into the master bedroom and no one was there. At first, he thought my mom had been there with my sister and I and left somebody there. When he realized we were not there, he didn't really know what happened. My mom just told him it was fumes and to open up a window and wear a mask. Keep in mind, my stepdad isn't the type of person to believe in ghosts or paranormal things, and he doesn't get scared easily, so this was out of character for him. Right after we moved in, almost instantly, my sister had an imaginary friend. This was unusual because she was never a play-pretend type of kid. She never played with dolls or anything. She was more of a computer Game Boy tech type of person, and she still is today. She was always very logical and thought very scientifically. Even though she was very young at the time, it was just odd because she had never had an imaginary friend before. My mom and I were always the more artistic, wacky ones, and my sister and her dad were the more logical ones, just to give you some insight. Generally, when a child invents an imaginary friend, it's because they want someone to play with. But her imaginary friend was super annoying, and he was always bothering her. She would constantly complain about Mikey not sharing a toy, or he won't play this game, or he touched my juice. He's not following the rules, not taking turns. Who invents an imaginary friend so they can fight with them all day? One day, my mom was out from talking to our neighbor. She was telling my mom that before the people before us, there was another family there with kids. Then she asked if we ever saw anything weird in the house. She told my mom that the family before saw stuff in the house and that her son, who was now a teenager, when he was little, he had an imaginary friend named Mikey. The kids that lived in our house before us also played with Mikey, and that she had seen him before. My sister and I would spend the weekends with our grandparents, and my mom would take the batteries out of all of our toys because they would go off randomly when no one was in our rooms. I remember I had a piggy bank that had made noise when you put money in it. One night it wouldn't stop, so I checked to see if it was jammed, but nothing was in it, so I ended up throwing it away because it wouldn't stop going off in the middle of the night. I had never had problems with sleeping before or after that house, but when we lived there, every morning I would wake up contorted in some way. I would wake up shoved in a little space between my bed and dresser in a ball, and I would always be stuck, and my mom would have to help me out in the morning. I would always try to figure out how, but never could. I was in 3rd or 4th grade at the time, and my mom had put guards on the side of my bed, but I would still end up contorted, shoved in between my dresser. This never happened when I would stay at my grandparents'. My mom worked a night job and would stay home during the day with my sister. So one night she came home from work and was washing her hands in the kitchen. From the kitchen you could see into the living room. My mom turned around because she could feel someone watching her, and for a split second there was a kid standing there. She said he looked about 8 years old, and then he was gone. Not too long after was my sister's birthday. After the party, my sister and I went to my grandparents' house. My mom and stepdad were alone. My mom took all the balloons from the party and tied them together and put them in the corner in the living room. So they were watching TV, The air was off because the weather is nice around my sister's birthday and the fan wasn't on. All of a sudden, all the balloon strings came together like someone grabbed it, and they floated down about a foot. Then they went around the corner and really slowly down the hallway. Then once it got to the light in the hallway, the balloons went down and around the light. It went down to the end of the hallway and stopped at my sister's door. My mom and stepdad were watching in shock, not knowing what to do. So my mom decided to talk to it. She said, "Hey, Mikey, if you want those balloons, you can have them." Right when she said that, the balloons went into my sister's room. Now, there used to be a Taco Bell by our house. This was before they started remodeling them, so it kind of looked like a missionary home. So my mom, my sister, and I were driving past the Taco Bell, and my sister said, "Mom, Mikey says that he used to live in a Taco Bell house." We didn't think anything of it. After we had lived there for a while, my mom decided to look into the history of the property. Before, it had been a cattle ranch. Then she learned that before, right on the property where our house and 3 others were, she found out that there was a children's missionary home. It was founded by a Catholic church, and they had orphans. And that's when it clicked. One year, my sister said, "It's Mikey's birthday, we have to get a cake." So my mom made a cake, and then she marked it with a little dot on the calendar. Then when she changed over the calendar, the next year she marked it with a dot again, just to see. The following year on the same day, my sister says, "It's Mikey's birthday. He wants a cake." At Christmas time, my mom went out and bought him a Hot Wheel and a little toy horse. A couple of days later, the horse disappeared. My sister didn't touch it, and I had no idea where it went. A couple of years later, when we were playing in the backyard, we found it, buried, in the yard. We brought it back inside and put it on the coffee table, and that night, it went missing again, and we still haven't seen it. So I was a picky eater and still am, but my stepdad used to make me stay at the table till I ate all my food. I was also stubborn, so I would sit there till 10 at night when he would finally just let me go to bed. But every night at that table, I would see shadows walking around the hallway from room to room. I would just think I was seeing things, but it was constantly almost every night. And that's pretty much everything I remember. My mom, sister, and I moved out after my mom and stepdad split up, and I haven't been back there since. My sister's dad still lives there, and she goes there on the weekends. She's in high school now. She still tells me that the house feels heavy, and she sees shadow people all the time, but that's it. I just thought I would share this experience because I do find it fascinating. I was young, and it's hard to remember everything because it was so long ago. I have a lot of pictures from the house with some weird stuff in it, and I'll ask my mom for them, and hopefully I can post them here. So this will be a long post about the experiences my family has been through. The first story is about my dad and my uncle. My dad and uncle shared a room in the 70s. Mid-70s, I believe the story takes place. My dad slept on the bottom bunk, and Uncle David slept on the top. One night when my dad was dead asleep, he suddenly was jolted awake and stuck his arm out right as my uncle fell. My dad luckily caught him, but to this day my dad has no idea how he woke up and why he stuck his arms out. Now on to my mom. She used to be a medical professional. Like anyone in the field, my mom always put patients above herself and never took her safety into consideration first. One time, in the early 2000s I believe, my mom was walking past an alley and found a man shot but still alive. She ran to him and helped the man without knowing if the shooter was still around. This next time, in the early 2010s, she was leaving Walmart and heard a man begin shooting and so many people screaming. Without thinking, she ran back inside and started helping people as best as she could. Now, these next two are also about my mom, but they're more about a spiritual thing. We were looking for a place to buy back in 2009, and we found a nice trailer. We weren't sure about it, but my mom said she felt like God was telling her to buy it. We did, and lived there for 4 years. In 2012, I believe, is when things sort of changed. I was really good friends with this one neighbor girl, Alyssa. I had known her for 3 years at this point, and one day she found me walking around. We sat at a park and she began telling me something that I would never forget. "You have an aunt named Eva, right?" I nodded and she continued. "Well, Eva has kids and I'm her daughter. I was put up for adoption really young due to abuse. I had finally decided to find my family that I lost, and that's when I came across your mom and dad's Facebook and saw your profile. Turns out that we're cousins." I sat there in shock and never even knowing my aunt had kids since I wasn't even born when they were taken away. My aunt died in 2009, so she never got to see her kids again. Now the final story about my mom. We were on our way back home from getting food, and my mom was about to get into the far left turn lane when something told her not to, so she got into the turn lane next to that one. A couple of minutes go by. This was a highway on and off ramp, so they take forever, when suddenly a car comes barreling through, hitting the light post, median strip, and car in that turn lane my mom almost went into. My mom doesn't understand why these things happen to her, but she's definitely grateful. This story is about my second oldest sister, Courtney. Something to know about my family is that we're all freakishly strong and all know how to fight. This happened when my sister was 13 back in 2003. She was walking down this one sidewalk one day when someone grabbed her and tried to have their way with her. Courtney can't feel pain. This was found out when my sister broke her arm, and my mom didn't believe her until 3 days later when it was swollen and purple. So she would do literally anything to save herself. She was trying to find something to help her get away when she grabbed a broomstick and beat this man so bad there were puddles of blood and a long trail leading to where his car was probably parked. My family tried to find the man but didn't get anywhere and figured he'd probably never try to hurt someone again after the damage my sister did. And now finally on to my stories. I have a lot of stories about my life, but only 2 that are noteworthy. The first happened in early 2017. I was 17 and one night at around 11 p.m. I was walking home from a gas station when this one foreign guy stopped me and asked, "How much?" Now, sure, I'm a fairly attractive girl. I'm full-figured in all the right places, pretty face and bright blue eyes, so I'm used to kind of getting hit on. I already knew what he was trying to ask, so I said, "Excuse me?" And this a-hole proceeds to say, "You're a streetwalker, yes?" I just walked away and he didn't bother me anymore, thankfully. That wasn't really too bad compared to others, but it was scary at the time and I just kept thinking that I was gonna have to end this dude if he tried anything. The last story comes from 2016. I was on my way home after spending a month and a half in Louisiana with my now ex. I was taking the Greyhound bus and we had to get off at Albuquerque, New Mexico, so the bus could get cleaned. I still had a good 10 hours before I was home. I had to go to the bathroom, and when I walked in, there was this one man in there with a bunch of other girls. I didn't think much of it, because I'm all for transgender people using the bathroom they feel most comfortable in. He didn't look trans, but who am I to judge? I get into a stall, and the whole time something just doesn't feel right. So I just hurry as fast as I can, and 10 minutes later we board the bus again. I sit in my seat, and the guy from the bathroom sits next to me. He makes small talk and seems cool, but then it gets gross real quick. He starts describing how I wipe myself and how I look doing it. I was 16 at this time and very non-confrontational unless my life is in immediate danger. Needless to say, that was a very awkward hour until we got to a gas station so I could tell the bus driver safely about what happened. Nothing much happened other than the driver forcing this dude to sit in the front. Thanks for listening, as I just wanted to share the myriad of stories my family and myself have culminated over the many years. So my 2 best friends and I had gone to our LGS, local game store, a few months ago to pick up some Magic the Gathering cards, and I parked my car right out front in the strip mall parking lot in plain view. a 2009 BMW 335i, if anyone's curious. Now, for context, my car has had some issues with the engine, but never any issues with the windows or locks at all, and never any electrical issues. It was about 3 p.m. and really hot, so we had some of the windows down on the drive there, but I rolled them up before we went inside and locked my car, obviously. We were in the local game store for about half an hour, and when we came back outside to get in my car, all the windows were completely rolled down, and all the doors were unlocked. I live in a large city in Western Canada where the crime rate is pretty bad, so my immediate thought was that my car had been broken into. But there are a few significant issues with that theory. One, I 100% locked my car, and both my friends confirm this. My car beeps when it's locked, and I always wait to hear it lock before I leave it anywhere. Additionally, my keys were on my person the entire time, so someone getting a hold of my keys is out of the question. Second, nothing was taken from my car. My friends had left her bag in the car, and it was exactly how she left it. Nothing was taken, and it didn't appear to be touched or moved at all. I also had a necklace in the center console that was still there, and some change in plain view. Stupid of me, I know, and it wasn't touched. My friends and I talked about it a lot when it happened, and we still do sometimes. My boyfriend and I joke about this a lot. He's one of the friends mentioned, but we still haven't really decided on a real cause for this. I was visiting with my mom the other day, and she brought up something that I had completely forgot about. A few years ago, when I was 19 to 20, I was a nanny for a baby who was being cared for by his grandma. His father was an addict, and his mother had tragically died right after he was born due to an overdose. The first day of said nanny job, the grandma showed me around the house and where everything was. Then she showed me his nursery room. This room was literally ice cold. I remember thinking, geez, why would a baby's room be so cold? I started feeling a tightness in my throat from being in there, so I did my best to move the grandma along the rest of the house tour. I started watching him regularly and would absolutely dread going into his room for things. I just kept getting that "you're not alone in here" feeling every time I went in there. It didn't feel malevolent or negative, but I felt watched intently. Now, I never really watched him past 6 p.m., but one night I was called to watch him overnight due to a family emergency. All was normal, and I put him in his crib for bedtime, sat with the baby monitor, and watched Harry Potter. He woke up about an hour after I put him down, and his grandma had always told me not to rush into his room when he's crying, so I didn't. Listening to the baby monitor, I started feeling strange, like something was happening, and I half expected to rush in and see something horrible. He was fine, just crying. I comforted him, put him back to sleep, and went back to my movie, but I felt strange about the feeling I'd gotten. I must have fallen asleep after that, because the next thing I knew, I woke up to the sound of him giggling through the baby monitor. I raised one eyebrow, thinking how strange that was, until I heard light female humming. My blood literally ran cold, and I felt prickling on the back of my neck. I felt frozen in place with fear because I shouldn't have been hearing anyone else in there. Fight or flight kicked in, and I ran in to see him laying in his crib, awake and amused by something I couldn't see. The room felt normal until I approached his crib and was hit with an icy cold mass. When said cold mass hit me, I immediately had a calming feeling, and his mother's name immediately popped into my head. After that, some odd things would happen here and there. When feeding him in his high chair, he'd look off behind me and smile and coo, but there was never anything there. The family dog would also stand in the doorway of the baby's room and just stare in, not moving. His favorite toys would be misplaced only to be in the spot I checked earlier, and other little harmless things. I truly felt like she was watching over him. So I have always had experiences with the paranormal ever since I was little. Here's the story of one of the most vivid incidences I had. Now, for a quick background on the home, it was an old Civil War hospital in Tennessee, and me and my siblings had found some old war money, uniform, and bag of stuff from that era. Lots of activity all the time, but this was by far the most intense. I was about 9 years old, lying in my bed trying to go to sleep. As I roll over, I see out of the corner of my eye someone standing in the doorway. My eyes dart to it, and I realize that it's not any of my 6 other siblings or my parents. It was a figure that looked like a man, but it was completely made of static. You know, like that static on television. What's strange is that I wasn't afraid for mine or my younger sister's safety. We shared a room and she was already passed out. I followed it with my eyes as it walked slowly across the room towards my bed. The closer it got, the more uneasy I felt, but still not scared. It bent down and got about 3 inches away from my face and then disappears. I felt a little strange afterwards, but still not terrified or anything. Any idea of what it could be? I've done research, but have come up with very few answers. I was staying at a friend's house for the weekend and had just taken a shower and had just left the bathroom. My friend's younger sister's door was slightly cracked, and as I walked by, I glanced inside for a quick second and stopped dead in my tracks. When I looked back again, I got this unbelievably uneasy feeling because it was unnaturally dark in her room. It wasn't anything too weird. I just thought to myself, wow, that's kind of creepy. Keep in mind all of this happened in the span of about 5 to 6 seconds. Right after I had thought that, without skipping a beat, the door slams right in my face, hard. My mouth wide open, I walk into the living room where my friend's sister is sitting on the couch watching TV. With my mouth still open, I said, "Did you hear that?" Where she says, "Yeah, I thought that was you." I shook my head slowly and said, thinking to myself maybe it was my friend pulling some joke, which was answered almost immediately by him quickly stomping down the stairs. Freaking out, I asked if he was in her room, and he of course said no with a confused look on his face. After telling them what happened, they tell me that weird things like that happen all the time, and they think the house is really haunted. The second story takes place in the house I stayed in throughout high school. One night I was up late playing a game with a few friends I've known for years and still keep in contact with online. After a while I got thirsty and went to go downstairs to get something to drink. I lived with my grandparents and my younger brother at the time, and after 11:30 everyone is asleep but me. This has been a sort of system I got used to. Over the 4 years I had lived there, everyone is asleep. This is sort of important for the story. I open my door quickly and close it as to not shine my bedroom light into my grandparents' room because they leave the door cracked so our dog can go in and out. We have 2 flights of stairs and an island in between, and hopefully you understand what that means. I go down the first flight of stairs and turn to the island to go down the second and stop dead in my tracks. When I looked into the living room kitchen area, it felt as though someone had turned down the brightness, so to speak, like when you're changing the settings in a game. The only other time this kind of darkness had stopped me before was in the previous story, which is why I felt the need to tell it. I walked down the next flight of stairs, not being able to see a thing. I reach the hardwood floor and walk towards the kitchen and see a dark, tall silhouette that looked like a tall person. The way it was standing, it looked like I would be looking at it from its side, and that's all I can see. I was paralyzed. I was convinced and still am convinced that someone or something was standing there. I'm not sure how long I stood there frozen for, but it felt like forever. All of a sudden, it looked like an arm reaches forward, and I hear a clink, clink, clink noise like a spoon stirring a cup. After a while, I back up slowly and go up the first flight of steps and stop and listen on the island. Clink, 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 the stirring noise again. I go up the second flight at this point, right next to my bedroom door, and listen again, perfectly still, not breathing. Clink, clink, then silence. After that, I got the strangest feeling that whatever it was about to come up the stairs. I went back into the safety of my well-lit bedroom and hopped on the mic to tell my friends what had just happened. Clearly still shaken, they could hear it in my voice. Then after a while of being in my room, I realized that the light switch was literally right next to me, so all I would have had to do was turn that switch on, and all my questions would have been answered. This is perhaps the most frustrating part about the whole ordeal. I later went down and turned the switch on and didn't notice anything out of the ordinary and went into the garage to get a soda. When I walked back in, I noticed a rag that was always next to the sink was draped over the faucet, which made me freeze. I wasn't sure if it had been like that the whole time because I didn't notice it, but it still freaked me out nonetheless. I put it back in its place and went to my room. Nothing like that has ever happened to me again since. I've asked everyone in the house if they were up separately, and all have said that they were fast asleep. Even if they were awake, why would they be doing something in the pitch black? All in all, both were very creepy experiences for me, and I will definitely be telling them until I'm very, very old. I'm a female, 19. The story I'm about to share takes place on April 15th, 2017, so I was 16 years old at the time. So you can better understand what I'm about to tell you, let me give you a little information on myself and the surroundings at the time. I have a brother who is only 15 months older than me, and we are very close, and I'd call him my best friend, to be honest. The house we were living in at the time was in the very back of a neighborhood and had 3 floors, a main floor with a living room, a basement that contained my brother's room and bathroom, plus the garage, and an upstairs which has the kitchen and 3 other rooms and 2 bathrooms, i.e. my mom and dad's room, my room, and a spare. When you first walk into the house, there's the living room with split stairs, 3 on the right going up to the next floor, and on the left of the 3 are a bunch going down to the basement. Once you go upstairs, you go straight to the kitchen, but turn right and there is a hallway. My room was first on the right, and the bathroom was diagonal to my room further down the hall. In the living room, we have a banister next to the stairs going down, and in front of the banister, we had a couch facing left from the front door. Now that I have all the information out, I can tell you what happened to me. On April 15th, I was lying in bed watching TV playing on my phone, normal 16-year-old stuff. My brother came into my room and laid on my bed watching YouTube on his phone, which I didn't mind because we were just chilling. Well, I got bored of mindlessly scrolling through Instagram, and Netflix had nothing new to offer me, so I decided to go longboarding, and my brother just stayed in my bedroom. I left the house around 9:30 and came home around 10 because it was super dark, and I didn't want to be out too late for my own safety, so when I got home, I left my longboard on the porch and laid on the couch in the living room facing the front door with my head against the wall and on the armrest. I didn't want to turn on any lights because I enjoyed chilling in the dark and playing on my phone while having music coming from my phone speaker. The only light I had was from my phone screen and the street lamp on the other side of the street. I was laying on the couch for about 10 minutes listening to my music, playing games on my phone, when my brother opened my bedroom door and walked into the living room and stood at the end of the couch. I couldn't see his face, but he started talking to me, and this is the conversation we had. "You can have your room back." "Okay." "Are you going to go to your room?" "No, I kind of just want to chill here for a bit." That's when my brother slightly turned and started walking downstairs, to which I whisper shouted, "Hey, good night, I love you." And he just said goodnight. I then heard his footsteps stop halfway down the stairs, to which I thought was odd, but didn't put too much thought into it until 5 seconds later. My brother walked out of the upstairs bathroom and told me to turn my music down because it was too loud. I was a little dumbfounded and asked if we had just had the conversation, which was fresh in my mind, and he responded with, "No." I was in the bathroom. And I was a little hectic, asking him repeatedly, "So you didn't just tell me I could have my room back?" He started getting annoyed and asking me what was up with me. And no, he hadn't told me any of that, and that's about when I lost it. I started yelling and crying, telling him it wasn't funny, and that he really scared me by doing all of this, and if he was lying, he needed to tell me right now. And he just hugged me and said he didn't know what had happened, but he swore he wasn't lying. That's about when my parents woke up from my screaming and crying, asking what was up, and I had to explain to them what happened. And they all believed me because they have had spooky stuff and encounters happen to them before. But what really bothers me is the fact that my brother was wearing a white t-shirt, and I didn't even question the fact as to why he was a solid black figure, even though there was light from the street lamp, and it would have lit up his shirt. Also, what would have happened if I would have gotten up when he had asked me to? I honestly get a little freaked out every time I tell this story, even though it was so long ago. Though I still live in that house. This happened earlier this year. I have a best friend who I'll call Jade. We live in Alberta, Canada, and this happened in the winter. I was having a sleepover at Jade's house one night. We had a few drinks and watched some scary movies. The night went pretty well, but around 8 a.m. that morning, this strange thing happened. About a year before this occurred, I had heard about this girl who was in Jade's closet. So Jade's friend, who I'll call Lexi, told Jade that she had seen a little girl come out of her closet every time she stayed the night there. She described her as looking a bit like Samara off of The Ring. Long black hair, a white dress, except she was very small, like a small child. So when I heard that story, I got a little freaked out, but didn't think much of it as I was a little skeptical. But in February of this year, it was pretty early and I was half awake. I didn't know Jade was awake, so I opened my eyes a little bit and I was facing Jade's closet. I was just blankly staring at it for a minute, then all of a sudden, my body froze. From Jade's closet, from the other side of that closet door, I heard in a child's voice say, "Hey." That was when I freaked out on the inside. Then I instantly felt a rush of very cold air flow over me. It was almost as if the heat from her room got sucked right out of it. It was such an uneasy and cold, dreadful feeling. It was winter too, so there was no way the heat had gotten turned off when it was minus 25 degrees Celsius. I had instant chills. I went to wake up Jade and I asked if she had heard that too. She said she did. She assumed that it was just me talking and mumbling things in my sleep. I thought she was still sleeping, so luckily I wasn't the one who had heard that. It shocked me. Then I thought back to the time that Jade's friend Lexi told her about the little girl in her closet. Lexi had seen her a lot, but neither Jade nor I ever saw her. That was very freaky. We were home by ourselves at that time too, so we still to this day have no idea what that was. I still think about it a lot. We even told Jade's mom and her sister about it too. They were confused because they weren't even home at the time. Lexi had also said that she's never seen the girl whenever she's at Jade's dad's house. It's always when she's at her mom's house. I didn't believe Lexi's story at first, being very skeptical, but now I do believe. I believe that there's a spirit of some sort living in Jade's room.
Proximity awareness is the feeling you get in the dark when you know something is nearby, but you can't see it. We've all experienced that creepy sensation. We blindly wave our arms around a lightless cellar, hoping to make contact with the unknown object for greater clarity. If we are deeply afraid, we might even pretend there's nothing there at all. Denial can be a comfort in small doses, but it can't change reality. If there's something with you in the dark, then to pretend otherwise won't help. That cobweb you just walked through probably had a large spider in it. That thing which slithered across your foot in the middle of the night was either a rat or a snake. And the evil presence you feel brooding beside you in the darkness, well, we both know what that is. I couldn't explain why I never got around to changing the light bulb in the basement. Over the years, that windowless dungeon with creaky hinges and musty odor became the catch-all for every broken piece of furniture or unwanted junk for 3 generations. Why my family didn't just sell, give away, or haul off the mounting collection of unwanted items was beyond me. Explanations aren't always easy. By the time I grew up and inherited the old house, it had already been a long-standing family tradition for as long as I could remember. Grandpa kept the cellar door bolted shut with an iron padlock. He only unlocked it when there was a new item to drag down into the basement. My siblings and I would beg him to be the one to take that outdated lamp or broken radio down there. It was spooky, but that was part of the excitement. It was the only occasion we would ever get to see the cluttered mess of discarded furniture and timeless spider webs. In truth, the mystique created by that locked door far outweighed the reality. For both my grandparents, the reason for saving everything was the practical virtue of frugality. They survived the Great Depression when times were incredibly hard. They didn't believe in throwing away anything for fear they might actually need it again. My father kept their pointless behavior alive because Grandma and Grandpa drove home the importance of saving everything just in case. And so it went that I eventually inherited the tradition. I grew up in the time of hippies and post-war prosperity. There was no plausible justification for me to save those worn-out rocking chairs with broken rails or lamps that no longer switched on. I just followed the time-worn pattern of hoarding junk for no real reason at all. It's what they always did with unwanted things, so it was good enough for me. Not once in the time did any of us retrieve or reuse an item that was relegated there, though. Once it went down the cellar stairs, it was abandoned and forgotten. For the past year or two, that semi-annual journey into the dusty abyss has been carried out by me without the benefit of light. I always forget that bulb is blown until I flip the impotent switch and am reminded. Then it comes flooding back to me. Every time it happens, I make a half-hearted resolution to stop putting it off. But then I do anyways because I'm lazy, and also because reaching the bare light socket requires a tall stepladder. The process is a logistical hassle. It's also impossible to carry a flashlight while carrying armloads of things at the same time. For no more often than I descend down there, I just let it slide until next time. Even though I'm a grown man now, I still have to push myself a little to do it. I put one foot in front of the other and descend a dozen or so wooden steps to the hard cellar floor. One blind step at a time. Eventually, my eyes adjust slightly until I make out the murky landscape of 70 years of discarded refuse. I scanned the clutter for an unoccupied space to deposit the newest addition of junk to the pile, but I was distracted by a creepy, uneasy feeling. In the darkness, I sensed something very near me in the walkway. It was so unnerving that I couldn't shake it. Despite the impossibleness of the situation, I definitely wasn't alone. The considerable presence in my proximity was very odd. and yet radiated a distinct level of fury. Whatever it was, it didn't utter a sound, but I knew it was there, and it was very angry. I could feel the unknown entity watching me intently. My arms were full, and I didn't know what to do. Should I pretend not to realize I was alone down there? Every instinct I had was to drop the armload of useless junk and run away screaming. Naturally, I would have hightailed it back up the stairs to the relative safety of the light and slammed the door shut. Maybe the unwanted thing in the cellar just wanted to be left alone. That would have been the best case scenario. By my stiff reaction, it surely knew I was aware of its feral aura. It would have been easiest just to set everything down in a nearby corner and slowly back away in a non-threatening manner. That would have been the safest approach, but for some inexplicable reason, I felt compelled to address the unknown thing lurking in my unlit basement. I don't know the circumstances of why you're here, but I mean you no harm, and I hope the same is true for you. I only intend to place these old items in the corner, and then I'll be on my way. There is no reason we both can't coexist in this place. I won't bother or disturb you any further. There was an extended silence, made even more excruciating by the chilling circumstances. I was at an extreme disadvantage. I couldn't see whatever was just a few feet away from me. At last, a hoarse rasp interrupted to offer a detente. Just like all the other things down here in the cellar, I am unloved and forgotten. I was never given a name, but I am your uncle. Like the rest of the unwanted things down here, I was abandoned many years ago by your grandparents. They were ashamed of my severe physical deformities. I have been chained to this floor for more than 40 years while spying on my happy family from the shadows. I never dared to show my face to anyone else walking above me. And only you make the solo trek down here to discard your refuse now. I can only conclude that the others are either dead or gone. I was stunned and completely speechless. I didn't know how to react to the horrific revelation or how to respond. The fierce aura of animosity I sensed earlier was gone. Perhaps earlier it was misguided fear or shame that masqueraded as rage and contempt. I moved closer to the direction of its low, wavering voice. I offer you my deepest sympathy. I am so sorry for the horrible misdeeds you've experienced. Grandpa kept the door strictly locked. All these years, I had no idea you were down here amongst the discarded furniture and debris. None of us did, but you must already realize that you've listened to everyone talk upstairs throughout the years. Both Grandpa and Grandma are dead and buried now. My dad himself died last year, and my sister wants no part of this place. Only I know your secret now. He was quiet as I spoke, my words resonating in the air. The tormented soul beside me in the darkness offered no immediate response. I hoped my sincere words brought him some solace for the incredible injustice he received and the rage that surely dwelled within. I suppose the light bulb being out overhead is no accident either, is it? I added with realization. How is it that you, survived down here so long? I think you know the answer to that, he croaked weakly. Indeed I do.
Hey friends, thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe and click that notification bell to be alerted of all future narrations. If you got a story, be sure to submit them to my subreddit, r Let's Read Official, and give and receive feedback from the community and maybe even hear your story featured on the next video. And join my Discord to interact with me and other listeners directly. And if you want to support me even more, grab early access to all future narrations for just $1 a month on Patreon, and maybe even pick up some Let's Read merch on Spreadshirt. And check out the Let's Read podcast, where you can hear all of these stories in long compilation form and save huge on data, located anywhere you listen to podcasts. Links in the bio. Thanks so much, friends, and I'll see you again soon.